My name is Rick Bloodworth. This is the Common Sense Christian Financial Channel. It is Saturday, February the 7th of 2026, and we've just got through with another wild week in the silver market. So I thought I'd bring you up to date as far as some of the observations that I have, for whatever that's worth, and then also a few stories that are in the news right now that I think would be helpful for us to keep our attention on as far as watching them play out. And so the first thing I wanted to point out was this wild silver market has been beyond anything we've ever seen before. In the history, at least the U.S. history of the silver and the gold market, this is unique. And because of that, I think it's caught a lot of people off guard. It should have caught a lot of people off guard because we just haven't had this type of experience before. And so let me remind you where we've come from. Last year, about probably April of 2025, the silver market had been about $30 an ounce for quite some time, very stable since the beginning of last year. And then in April, it started its slow advance upward. By the time we got to September, it had actually reached $45 an ounce. And then by October, we reached $54 an ounce. After that, it started to go down. It went down, probably about $10 or $12 an ounce, which was a pretty big decline at that time. It doesn't seem so big now, but at the time, it seemed like a really big deal. But it started to slowly advance its way back up until in November, it hit that $54 mark again, and it actually went through it. And once it went through that mark, well, the market just started to go up, and it didn't stop until the end of January. By December, we broke $60 an ounce, and then $70 an ounce, $80 an ounce. We went in to January, and we just kept going. We broke $100 an ounce. The week before last, it had actually gotten up to $121 an ounce, I believe on Thursday of last week. And then on Friday, we had the big correction day. Had a high of $118 for the day, but a low of $73. It finally settled down $30 for the day at $85 an ounce. But we had a $45 range in one day a week ago from yesterday. And then this week, it started up again. On Monday, we had a $17 range. On Tuesday, a $10 range. On Wednesday, a $9 range. On Thursday, a $20 range. And it went way down that day. And then Friday, it started off on the Shanghai market just collapsing for just a few minutes. And then it started to make its way back up. But Thursday night, Friday morning, we had quite the decline for a while, at least Thursday afternoon, I guess we should say, in Shanghai, but it was morning Shanghai time. And it actually went down to $64 an hour, $64 an ounce. And at that point, the regulators of the Shanghai market stepped in. They had identified 6 large participants who had exceeded the number of contracts they were permitted to add to a certain position. And so they stepped really hard on those individuals. I'm not sure if there was another one in addition to that who had a gigantic short position in silver, or if he was part of that group of 6. But whatever it was, Shanghai intervened, and from that point, although it had dropped to $63.98 an ounce, it went back up, and it just kept going back up steadily through the day on the Western markets to where it finally closed at $77 and some change. So we had a wild ride last week. We've had a lot of wild rides recently, not just in the silver market, but in all the precious metals markets, and even some of the financial markets. The stock market has had some wild gyrations. Bitcoin certainly has had some wild gyrations. And so I believe at times like this, on the weekend, it's good to just kind of step back and think about what's happened. Let the dust settle a little bit and consider the fact that this wild ride that we have been on has not been normal at all. As a matter of fact, it reminds me of something that Larry Burkett, a Christian financial advisor, said many years ago. I think it was back during the 80s. And it was an observation he had made after a trip to California. He was at an office there in California, and they had an earthquake. It wasn't just a real big one, but it was big to him. He had never been in anything like it. And he said as he looked around that office, he was amazed at how calm the people were. They were blasé, was his words. And he said they had just gotten so used to these tremors that they no longer seemed to affect them. Even though in California they've been talking about the fact that there's going to be a big earthquake at some point. And in fact, they had a fairly big earthquake not too long after that. But he talked about economic things and how sometimes we have tremors in our worldwide economic picture. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. I think these big moves, these wild moves up and down in all these different markets might be tremors warning us that something is on the horizon. I don't know that for sure, but this is just an odd time anyway. I've had several viewers point this out, but next Friday, I believe February the 13th, at noon in Shanghai, the Shanghai Commodities Exchange is going to close for a week's time. They're celebrating the Chinese New Year. And so they'll just operate half a day next Friday, and then after that, the entire next week, that exchange will be closed. Well, there's been so much activity on that market recently and some wild swings that have begun in that market that it kind of makes you wonder what's going to happen while they're closed. Will things settle down and get back to normal, or will there be some people that are going to take advantage of the fact that that particular exchange, the biggest physical exchange in the world, is actually going to be closed? I think in addition to that, the Hong Kong stock market's going to be closed from Monday at noon until about Friday of that week. And so there's a lot of things going on over in Asia that will perhaps be worth keeping our eye out for. But again, today is February the 7th. The Chinese New Year, as far as the shutdown of the Shanghai and the Shenzhen exchanges in China, will occur at noon next Friday, the 13th. And so keep your eye out for that. Also, we have a pretty big contract expiration coming up for the March contract. The first day of intent to take delivery will occur on February the 27th. And so there's a lot of things coming up in a market that really has seemed to have a very tight supply of physical silver, while at the same time there seems to be an increase in physical demand. And so whether this will be a non-event or whether it will be something that they'll write about in history, nobody really knows. But I do think it's something to keep on our radar screen. So those are some of the items that are in the news right now. I thought I would pass that along to you during the weekend just to be thinking about some of these items. And then the other thing I wanted to do today was talk a little bit about allocation and how we handle our silver accumulations, whether we're just starting out when we're young or whether we're just starting out as an older individual, or maybe we have had quite a career of stacking silver and now we're trying to figure out what to do with it. And so I thought I would talk about that just for a little bit today. This is certainly something that my wife and I have done very much through trial and error, and I thought I would maybe share the way that we allocate our silver stack, if you want to call it that, to make sure that it's being used in the best possible way. We retired about 3 years ago, and when we did that, we had been accumulating, before we had retired, we'd been accumulating silver for quite a number of years. I think the first physical silver I bought was in 1983, the year after my wife and I got married. And after that, I started investing in silver futures for a number of years. I was a real estate appraiser, had a good balance sheet and some extra money, and the silver market had fascinated me ever since it had been so much in the news in 1979 and 1980 when the Hunt brothers were doing their attempt to corner the market during that time. And so it got to be something that was very interesting to me. I started trading on the commodities market probably in the mid-1980s, and it wasn't quite as risky as it might sound, because from about 1984 to 2004, the market just kind of stayed around that $5 mark. And so investing in a 5,000 ounce contract of silver, well, you might have an opportunity to make or lose $5,000, but not much more than that. Compare that to today, when just the other day we had a $45 range. Well, you multiply 45 times 5,000 ounces and you're looking close to $250,000. So it's much different now than it was back then. But again, that's what we did when we first got married. I learned the silver market through that. I started buying physicals in the early 1990s. As a matter of fact, I think the first real purchase I had made, other than those few little ounces in 1983, was a 500 ounce monster box for a little over $3,000, and then 5 ounces of silver. I think it was 50 1/10 ounce gold eagles, and probably got that for around $300 an ounce, so about $1,500 for that. And so not a really big investment by today's standards, but back then it was a pretty good investment. Shortly after that, we changed careers. I became a preacher. We moved to a small town in Texas, and it was nice that we had a little bit of savings in silver, because we were then able to use that in order to help make ends meet until our salary got a little bit more in line with what a family of 5 needed. So we stopped accumulating at that point and really divested ourselves of most of our precious metals. And that was that's where we were until about the year 2002, when I started buying and selling on eBay. And typically, my purchases on eBay were 90% silver. I could buy 90% silver for anywhere from $3 face value to $4 face value, and I'd go down to my local coin shop in Amarillo and sell it for about $5 per $1 face value. And so it was a nice little supplement to our income on that. And again, it allowed us to begin saving in silver on top of that. But through the years, we accumulated a certain amount of silver so that by the time we were ready to retire, we were able to retire even with no pension from the preaching and very small Social Security because of our salary constraints during the 30 years that I preached. And so it was something that was very nice to have, and I thought I would pass along to some of you the allocation that we use with our silver. And so let me just give you a hypothetical. It's similar to some of the things we have done, but also it doesn't go exactly with what we did. But let's just say you decided to start saving in silver 10 ounces a month. Back when I first started doing this, that would be about $500 a month to save, $50 a month to save that kind of silver. Today, well, at $80 an ounce times 50, you're looking at a little bit more than that. You're looking at a pretty good price, times 10, you're looking at about $800 a month. But let's say you're saving at $10 ounces per month. And so you just start doing that. Maybe you start doing that when you're first married, or when you first start investing in silver. You've discovered silver and you think it's going to be something that will work for you, and you just start putting aside 10 ounces per month, whatever that is, whether it's $5 an ounce or $100 an ounce. That's what you intend to do. And so at the end of the first year, you've accumulated 120 ounces. That's not a bad little nest egg, especially For those of you who may have started a few years ago, you wouldn't have a tremendous amount of money into it, but now you've got something that's worth something. But let's say you do that for 10 years, and so obviously after 10 years you're up to 1,200 ounces of silver. If you do it for 30 years, then you're to 3,600 ounces of silver. And so now you've got a pretty good stack of silver, and you've only been doing it bit by bit, very slowly, 10 ounces a month. But after about 30 years, or let's just say a little bit longer than that, let's say you have 4,000 ounces of silver. And now you're ready to stop accumulating your silver. But what do you do with it? How do you allocate it? And so that's what I really wanted to talk about for the next few minutes, is how my wife and I have allocated our silver holdings in such a way as to where it made the most sense to us and gave us the greatest advantage. So let's just say we have 4,000 ounces of silver. You're ready to retire. For us, what we did was we put 15% of our total silver holdings into an investment account. And by investment, I mean we would just take that physical silver and we would sell it when it looked like it was high, and we would buy it back as it went down through the years, and just start doing that. I've also got a small brokerage account, which is a little bit easier to trade. Obviously, you have tax implications on all this. I understand that. I've had a lot of people that have really jumped all over me for ever selling silver or having any type of an investment. But let's face it, if you have a salary, you're going to have to pay taxes on that. And so wherever you get your income from, there is going to be tax on that. It's a part of life. If you make a profit, don't whine about the fact that you only get to keep 85% of it or 70% of it or whatever it is. You have more than you started with, is the point. But let's take 15% of 4,000 ounces. That would be 600 ounces that you would have in your savings account or in your stack that was reserved for just trading, just back and forth. And it's not something that you'd necessarily do very often. I've mentioned I've had a buy and sell schedule for years. That sell schedule goes all the way up to $1,000. I don't ever expect to sell any silver for $1,000 an ounce, but it goes all the way up there. It also goes all the way down on the buy side to $10 an ounce. I don't expect to see it at $10 an ounce again in my lifetime, but if it does, I've got a plan for that. But again, get yourself, if this is something that you want to do, to have a certain percentage of your silver as an investment, then get you a buy and a sell schedule and go by that plan. Because if you do, it truly will not matter to you whether the market's going up or down for this part of it, because you've got a plan each way. If you've sold at $100 an ounce and drops down to $30 an ounce, well, you can buy it back and make a pretty good profit. I'm not saying it's going to drop down to $30 an ounce. I'm just giving you a for instance. But here, that's what you do with the investment account if that is one of the ways you want to allocate your silver. Another is an insurance account. And this, I suppose, is something that everybody that's a stacker kind of has in mind, to where a certain amount of their fiat currency is traded for a physical metal. They don't ever intend to use it unless they have to use it. Very much like when we moved from Wyoming to Texas and I became a preacher, and we needed those funds just to pay our living expenses. We didn't want to do that, but we were sure glad that we had that silver and that gold at that time. And that's what an insurance policy is for. It's for an unplanned event that could happen. It's very akin to having a budget where you've got an emergency account. You don't plan on your refrigerator going out next week, but you realize it could happen. Or you could have a car repair that's not covered, any number of things. But if you have an insurance account and you allocate 15% of 4,000 ounces, again, you've got 600 ounces in that. And so that's going to leave you, obviously, with 70%. And that, for my wife and I, has been our savings account. And we do have about 70% of our silver in that. and that savings account is our retirement account. The idea is that we're going to sell 5% of it every year to help meet expenses. Now, we've been retired for 3 years and we haven't had to do that yet, but in the future, I suspect that we will. And so that's 70%. Let's say you have 4,000 ounces. That would be 2,800 ounces of silver. And you're going to say, well, you're going to run out of silver sooner or later. And of course, this is true. You very well might. But I'm not saying sell 5% of 2,800 ounces every year. I'm saying you sell 5% of the balance of your savings account, if that's what you've got it for. Your savings account may be something completely different. You may have 10% in your savings, and you may have 90% in your insurance, and you don't ever plan on doing anything but leaving it to your kids or to some worthy charity. That's great, whatever you want to do, but you can come up with some sort of an allocation plan for the silver that you do hold, and by doing so, then you've got an idea. This 600 ounces or this 15% will never be touched unless I just have to do so. This 2,800 ounces, this 70%, will only be sold at a rate of 5% a year in order to help meet our expenses. We're not going to go out and buy a new car with this or something else unless you have a separate savings account in silver for the new car. And then the investment account, well, that gives you some leeway to take advantage of bargains when they turn up, and they do turn up. I've been doing this for 45 years, and we've come across a lot of bargains. There's also been times when the market has gone up so substantially that it was a good time to take a little bit of profit on those bargains. Well, we had an investment account for that. We didn't dip into our insurance or our savings, but we did have an account specifically for that. And I've mentioned part of that account now, this investment account, we use as a brokerage account. And typically, we just have stocks in there that represent silver mines or gold mines or even some copper resources. But the idea on that is it's for an investment. You're trying to trade it for a profit so that you can increase that investment. But hopefully this will give you some sort of an idea, whether you're just starting out, you're just brand new to the silver market, and you can even be 70 years old when you're just starting out. Well, you can start out with 10 ounces a month, and if you can afford that, then you've really got something, I think, with which to build a future on. But if you're 20 years old and just starting out, well, you got a lot of years to be able to take advantage of that month-by-month accumulation. There will be times, like in my wife and I's situation, where we had to sell all of it and start over. But we just started up again, and the reason we did was because we saw how well it worked for us when we needed it. But this hopefully will give you an idea of how we allocate our silver. Obviously the number's different here, but other than that, the percentages are the same. And so once you get that firmly in your mind and get a plan, I think you'll find that investing in silver is a lot more enjoyable, and you're not so concerned about the temporary ups and downs and all the wild rides that silver will take you on. Well, that's the video for today. Let me know what you think about all this in the comments. I always enjoy those comments and appreciate your taking the time to add them to the discussion. Thank you for watching today, and I appreciate those of you who have subscribed. But I hope that this will help you in some way, and I hope we'll see you again next time. God bless.